Hello, it's another month, and that means another terrific issue of Hepatology Communications. I'm Elliot Tapper, co-editor-in-chief, and I'm here to bring you the latest and greatest in clinical research, and this month's issue is packed. So I'd like to go through some of the titles, share with you what I'm excited about and how I think these papers are advancing the cutting edge of liver research, beginning in no particular order with an article from UPMC hospitals from doctors Amir Gogol and Ramon Bataller. High incidence of advanced liver disease and mortality in patients presenting with alcohol use disorder. This is an important study because it examines the natural history of those who are presenting with a known risk factor for advanced liver disease, that is alcohol use disorder. 32,808 patients with alcohol use disorder presented for care and were followed up for an average of nearly 6 years. 1 in 8 of them went on to develop cirrhosis, and the overall mortality in that time frame was 20%. It's influenced by, in part, their comorbidities, things like infection with hepatitis C, but also, more importantly, for today's patients, type 2 diabetes. It wasn't particularly helpful to stratify their risk for this outcome with the use of things like fibrosis for reminding us that when the pretest probability of advanced liver disease is sufficiently high in a high-risk population such as this, we need to go straight to early interventions and more specific risk stratification tools. Terrific paper. We're proud to publish it. Dr. Mamatha Bhatt, a pioneer, a thought leader in AI, in liver disease and liver transplantation, brings us a paper on the role of AI in a very unique and important post-transplant population. We receive tons of papers that look at new AI-based models, but what makes this one stand out is the importance of the clinical outcome and the multi-center cohort that she was able to put together to study this. So 706 patients underwent liver transplantation for autoimmune hepatitis, and it recurred in roughly 1 in 6 patients thereafter. And the key predictors using an AI machine learning type model were their younger age, higher necroinflammatory activity at the time of explant, and higher MELD score at the time of transplantation. And what this informs is how you adjust their immunosuppressives in the following years. Things like shifting to cyclosporin were associated with a higher risk. And at the very least, if we're not able to make interventions, this is clearly a population that is enriched for worse outcomes and would benefit from additional investigation or novel agents. The title of this paper, Artificial Intelligence Predicts Recurrent Autoimmune Hepatitis After Liver Transplantation in a Multi-Center Cohort Study. Dr. Jiang, leading a very large cohort study from Korea, examined 6,500 patients with MASLD who had a combination of fibrosis indices, both FIB4 as well as vibration-controlled elastography. The title of this paper is The Risk of Cardiovascular Events in MASLD according to fibrosis stage and diabetes status. We all know that most patients with MASLD are unlikely to develop cirrhosis compared to cardiovascular events. So we rely on these large-scale epidemiological studies to give us hard data to inform our patients and power additional models as well as outreach efforts. So patients here uh, with pre-diabetes, the highest fibrosis tier was associated with higher incident ASCVD risk, 2.62-fold higher, accounting for competing risks of death. And in patients with diabetes, the cumulative incidence of ASCVD was high across fibrosis tiers between 15 to 18.5% without a significant increase in fibrosis severity. And so the clear message here is that once you have established diabetes, that fibrosis risk is probably not communicating anything with respect to the cumulative incidence of cardiovascular events. But for patients with pre-diabetes, we should be paying attention and informing the patient as well as their primary care providers about their outsized risk of cardiovascular events. We were privileged to publish a paper. This is a massive global undertaking, global multi-center validation of non-invasive fibrosis assessment pathways in both MET ALD and ALD. It's a multinational, multi-center cross-sectional study across 35 centers, 16 countries, and it included nearly 900 patients with ALD, 41% with Met ALD. This is one of the larger cohorts with Met ALD, and 58.7% with ALD, median age 52. And here, among biopsy-proven participants, the area under the curve for detecting advanced fibrosis was okay for Fib 4.72 and was pretty good for those who are undergoing VCTE 8.33. Fib4 performed better in the Met ALD subgroup, whereas in ALD, that area under the curve was not good at 0.5. In the sequential pathways where you're applying these tests in series, the false negative rate for advanced fibrosis was 6.8% overall, less than 5% for those with Met ALD, and 11% for those with ALD. Harkening back to what we discussed with the first paper is that when you have someone with rip-roaring alcohol use disorder, that is someone where your index of suspicion for harboring advanced fibrosis and developing incident cirrhosis and decompensation should be sufficiently high that you're not simply relying on the number yielded by any diagnostic test. I'd also like to call out that we have an editorial that was published after a randomized trial. This one is called Midodrine in Patients with ACLF and Ascites When Increasing Blood Pressure is Not Enough. Dr. Pompili and Carissini from Italy editorialize a great paper out of India where doctors led by Anand Kulkarni gave patients with ACLF Midodrine 5 milligrams TID and did not observe any improvement in their clinical outcomes. And perhaps for the reasons why, I'd encourage you to read this terrific editorial from experts out of Italy. We have a few reviews that I hope you'll take a look at. The Contemporary Epidemiology, Causes and Management of Drug-Induced Liver Injury by the Dr. Linnea Swanson and Bob Fontana from the University of Michigan. The Global Epidemiology of Cirrhosis Among Contemporary Patients. This Dr. Salkio leads a stellar group from around the world, including friends of Hepatology Communications, Drs. Amit Singhal and Karn Wijarn Precha, recent transplant to Mayo Jacksonville. This is a must-read resource for everything you need to know about what is happening in the world of cirrhosis. And finally, on the review front, we have an exciting review about the role of ammonia in chronic liver disease. This is a paper written by proponents of ammonia, authorities in ammonia interorgan trafficking, ammonia level determination, as well as therapeutics to address hyperammonemia, led by Dr. Herbert, as well as Dr. Rajiv Jalan. It's evidence of the lack of bias in the editorial board of Hepatology Communications, where we park our personal opinions aside to highlight the strongest possible arguments about all things relating to liver disease. This is a massive review. It highlights everything that you need to know about why ammonia levels are elevated in chronic liver disease, what that means, and what we should be doing about it, both with respect to diagnostic, prognostic, and therapeutic potential. Phenomenal review. I'd also like to call out a clinical trial by Dr. Sharad Watwani, associate editor at Hepatology Communications. Health advocates to address social adversity in pediatric liver transplantation. We are all aware that there are significant disparities in clinical outcomes, as well as process measures, receipt of adequate care, quality care throughout virtually every facet of hepatology, from general hepatology through transplantation. But what are we going to do about it? Dr. Wadhwani launched a trial of health advocates to provide weekly support. These trained navigators helped identify and connect participants with community-based resources and communicated social risks to the transplant team, ensuring that they could stay ahead of things. This is a small single-arm study, right? It has to be examined in large phase studies. We are thrilled to publish this because we know that this is an investigator on the right track. We know that this is preliminary data for a large multi-center evaluation that will prove some of the associations detected within, including but not limited to improvements in the medication level variability index. And the qualitative analysis, when they looked under the hood and they asked the participants how they felt about this relatively low-cost intervention. They felt communication was improved. They felt that they had better control of their needs, and they had, as a result, reduced stress. Health advocates. Brilliant idea from Dr. Sharad Wadhwani at the University of California, San Francisco. I'd like to highlight a research letter from the group of Dr. Ashley Spann, first author, Ertuglu, prospective validation of a real-time natural language processing pipeline for the extraction of elastography results from the electronic health record. We need experts like this to build the tools within the electronic health record that gets the information that we need to us when we need it. And in addition, not only is this helpful for clinicians to be presented with this data that is easily and accurately extracted using NLP tools. Once you're pulling out this otherwise unstructured information, you enable large-scale population health interventions that were hitherto impossible. Most research using databases, electronic health records, relies on these structured data like diagnosis codes or lab values. But when there's critical information buried in a report or in a long note, it lays there until somebody goes out of their way to open it up, copy and paste, and act on that. This is a study that was nearly perfect in pulling out all of the information that was important vis-a-vis elastography. liver stiffness from ultrasound or from MRI, and populating this in a note. The clinical and research implications of this basic work are many, and we are privileged to publish this in Hepatology Communications. So along the lines of using natural language processing tools, we have another report, this a full article led by the group of Jin Ji, first author Benjamin Cho. This one is entitled Incidence and Diagnostic Yield of Repeat Imaging-Based Screening for Hepatic AVMs in Patients with Hereditary Hemorrhagic Telangiectasias. And the key thing here is that the incidence of hepatic AVMs was 0.52 per 100 person years. There were 48 repeat imaging studies, and the detection rate per repeat study was 4.2%. So they used a large language model with an NLP pipeline to parse the unstructured clinical documentation and yield high accuracy about the status of the liver for this relatively rare condition. This is a window into the mind of an investigator who is helping to optimize our ability to care for relatively rare and highly morbid conditions by training these LLM and natural language processing models to help us care for these patients in a unique and, I think, generalizable way. And I'm going to close with a study by Dr. Catherine Cooper. Vitamin D supplementation is associated with reduced risk of hepatobiliary malignancy in patients with PSC. So anytime you see that vitamin D is associated with decreased clinical outcomes, you have to suspect up front that there is significant confounding by indication, but more importantly, confounding by immortal time bias, where it's simply the case that people who didn't live long enough to have their vitamin D checked or their vitamin D replaced or to fill the vitamin D prescription were at higher risk of developing the outcome than those who did receive those tests and prescriptions. So Dr. Cooper and her colleagues, including Dr. Dan Pratt, can attest to the fact that the editorial board of Hepatology Communications did what amounted to torture, pushing this paper to the limits, demanding all kinds of reanalyses to eliminate or virtually eliminate the risk of those biases. And to our surprise, Dr. Cooper came through. They have a very large registry of patients with PSC that are followed and receive excellent care. And of the 162 patients with who were followed up for a median of 7 years, 15 patients developed a hepatobiliary malignancy, so 12.3 per 1,000 person years, adding a nice data point to the epidemiology of this condition. Vitamin D supplementation was associated with a significantly lower risk of hepatobiliary malignancy in both conventional and matched IPTW type analyses. This association was consistent across vitamin D strata, and accounting for competing risks, the 5-year incidence of hepatobiliary malignancy in patients receiving vitamin D supplementation was 1.1% compared to 11.5% without. Does it prove anything? No. Is it an association? For sure. Is it exciting? You bet. Would love to see a validation of this, subject to the same rigorous methodology, and we are happy to publish this final article in the August 2026 issue of Hepatology Communications. So with that, I'm going to conclude. I left out some papers, more for you to see. Uh, I'm excited every month with the papers that we're bringing to you. They're only getting better. Grateful to be the editor of this terrific journal. Grateful that you listened. Hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you again, same time, same place, uh, next month.
Hi, I'm Carmen Wong, and I'm very excited to share with you three interesting work published at Hepatology Communications on cholestatic liver diseases. The first study I want to share with you is a study which identifies circulating multi-omic signatures in plasma of primary sclerosing cholangitis PSC patients, and the signature is associated with its severity and progression to cholangiocarcinoma. Second study I want to share with you is a spatial omics study which revealed that SOX4 activity in biliary atresia is associated with loss of liver zonation and the increased liver scarring heterogeneity. The third study I'm going to share with you is a mouse study showing that LACT2 deficiency worsened cholestatic liver injury by disrupting bile acid synthesis and gut microbiota homeostasis. Taken together, these three studies allow us to better understand the mechanisms driving cholestatic diseases and identify potential biomarkers that can predict severity of the diseases. Enjoy the studies!